Hello and welcome to your Recipe for Financial Success with me, Emma, and my colleagues Becky and Julie.
In each episode, we'll be bringing you a list of ingredients to help you cook up a storm and master methods to finesse your finances. We'll be helping you expand your repertoire and hopefully teach you a few new skills along the way.
So, clear the counters and get your mixing bowls ready for today's recipe. Let's get started.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Deb. So today I have Deb Morgan from Not a Rehearsal, and we're going to be delving into relationships. So thank you so much for joining me today, Deb.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about you and who you are basically, Deb?
Well, I'm Deb Morgan and I'm known as the real relationships expert. So it'd be no surprise really to deduce from that that I'm a relationships coach. And I work primarily with women, but I also work with couples, usually over the age of 40, who are perhaps having problems in their relationships. They want some help to create stronger, healthier relationships, or they're single and they want some help to ensure they go into their next relationship and create a really strong, healthy relationship in their next relationship. So that's what I do.
Wow. So how did you get into doing what you do now?
Oh my goodness, how long have we got?
Short story.
Basically, it started with me. I have a background of abusive relationships, unfortunately. My first and second marriages were both abusive. And then I entered into a relationship which was also abusive. And I got to a stage through all of that where I wanted to understand why this was happening, and got to the point where I thought, well, the only common denominator here is me. What am I doing for those people to treat me in that way? And I learned obviously that it wasn't my fault, but what it did was set me on the path to psychology, to study in psychology. So I studied for a psychology degree with the Open University, and I learned an awful lot around that, and then sort of delving into the likes of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, etc. I understood that it was about their behaviours and their patterns that they had learned, usually as children. And I'm not going to go into all the psychology of it there, but I recognised then that actually, if we could treat or train people, educate people to create strong, healthy and robust relationships, we could potentially reverse the prevalence of domestic abuse. And that's a massive, massive mission. It's quite scary. And initially I started working with survivors of domestic abuse, just to help them understand that, you know, there is life beyond abuse. You can create the life you want. I wrote a couple of books about it. But what I found was, because I was always focusing on domestic abuse and the bad stuff, it was having a really adverse psychological and physiological effect on me as well. Although I was helping people, it wasn't doing me any good. So I decided that I needed to flip it on its head and thought, what's the opposite of an abusive relationship? Well, it's a strong, healthy and robust relationship. So by flipping it on its head, I was then able to offer the same support, but in a far more positive way. And when you go into it with a more positive attitude, the results are better because you're not mired in victimhood. And that's a term I used about myself. You know, I'm keeping myself mired in victimhood here. I'm always going to feel like I'm the victim, and that's not healthy for anybody. You know, there are stages where we are all victims, and that's perfectly acceptable. But you don't want to remain in that place for a significant length of time, because that's equally as damaging as staying in the relationship. So it was about putting all of that together. And I knew I wanted to coach people. I'd had a business a number of years ago, and I'd seen the value of business coaches. Obviously, I know the value of coaches. You know, I had a running coach when I learned to run and things like that. We go to diet companies and have diet coaches when we want to lose weight. So I knew I wanted to coach, but I didn't really understand back then about the concept of life coaches. They were quite new on the scene. So over time, I thought, right, then I'm a life coach. And then that evolved into me focusing solely on relationships, because all of the people I was working with they wanted to know about relationships. So that really was my area of expertise, because I had that background in abusive relationships. I then focused on that in my studies. And in amongst that as well, I'd done some work within the sex industry. So I was able to look at relationships from every angle, literally and metaphorically, and take it from there. So that enabled me to have a really good overview of both a male and a female perspective of relationships. So that's why I do what I do now.
Wow. You can tell just the way you speak about it, and you sound so passionate about it and enthusiastic is so lovely to see.
Oh, thank you.
I think probably having that obviously awful background for you has helped you to to help so many other people in a way that maybe you didn't have the help at the time. So
completely. And I do recall going through it at various stages and getting to a point where I was at my absolute lowest. And it's no surprise, anybody that follows me on social media will know that I attempted to take my own life. Fortunately, I didn't succeed. But back then I saw that as a failure as well. And I'd had failure after failure with my marriages, my relationships, my business, that I just thought that was a whole load of rubbish. But I got to a stage when my attempt to take my own life had failed. I thought, right, I've obviously been unsuccessful for a reason. There are lessons to learn from this. If I can help just one other person not to go through what I've been through, then it will have been worth it. And that was the turning point for me. And, it wasn't quite as clear as that. It wasn't a flash of light or anything that brought me to that conclusion. That was after, months, maybe years of really thinking, what on earth is going on? What can I do? Why is this happening? And I realized, actually, I need to help at least one other person. And of course, what's happened is by focusing on wanting to help others, I've been able to help so many more people. And for me, that's fantastic. So now it's become almost a worldwide mission to reduce the prevalence of domestic abuse. Out of that one little seed that really just kept me going. It gave me the motivation just to get up off the floor,
Wow, such an incredible story to share, your journey of where you've got to where you are today.
Thank you.
So obviously, being a relationship coach, you are the perfect person to help talk to us about relationships and how money can affect those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into the depths of that, I'm just intrigued. Do you have a first memory of money that you could share with us?
Yes, I do actually. My mum had been a building society manager. She'd started her career in the bank when she was, I think, 18 or 19. And those were the days where nothing was computerized, as you might imagine. And if her bank account was overdrawn even by a penny, it was an instant dismissal. So she was always very, very strict about money in, money out. And I recall every Friday evening, after we'd had our evening meal, she would sit down once the dishes were done and everyone was settled. It would normally be about 7 o'clock. And she'd get out her notebook and she'd write, it was basically a profit and loss account for the house, all of the income, all of the outgoings, and she would balance it every single week. And she knew exactly what was going where. And as I got older, I became more aware of her still doing that. And then, hang on a minute, I've lost 15 pence or something silly like that. It'd be a small amount. And she wouldn't stop until she had found where every last penny was. That, of course, was a hangover from her days in the bank. But that's my recollection of her as I was growing up. Every Friday evening, she would have to balance her books. So almost do the housekeeping for the house.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
She still does it now. She's in her mid-70s and she still does it. I don't think she does it every week now, but she does balance the books on a regular basis.
Wow. Is that something that rubbed off on you as well then?
Yes and no. It had a bit of an adverse effect on me actually, because I saw it, I think I interpreted it. And of course, with being able to look at it through the lens of psychology as well now, I see it so differently. But I know back then I interpreted it as a way of keeping really tight control on your money. And I'd always been quite good with money. When I'd had a paper round and when I'd earned pocket money, I could do so much on so little. But then when I got my first job and my first salary, oh my goodness, there was more money than I'd ever had at any one time. And that led me down a path where, having watched my mum be so, not tight with money, that's the wrong word, but so aware of what she was spending and live so within a budget. And I'd say to things, well, Mum, why don't you buy that brand of coffee instead of that one? Because I've saved 5 pence on a jar, and things like that. So whilst as an adult now I understand it, back then I thought, well, this is just ridiculous. Just buy what you want. If you've got the money there, buy what you want. For me, it turned into really expensive shoes and really expensive cosmetics and skincare. And that was my downfall, unfortunately. I ended up with an awful lot of debt. And it's kind of been the story of my life, if you like, because I inferred earlier that I'd had a business before. And whilst there are lots and lots of reasons that I'm not going to go into right now, the business became insolvent. It was a very successful business, became insolvent almost overnight due to some internal sabotage, which I won't expand on right now. And I ended up having to go through personal bankruptcy. So it was almost as if that whole thing had caught up with me from my sort of late teens, early 20s. And finally, it took bankruptcy for me to understand, oh, right, okay, I can't just go out and have what I want when I want. And of course, there's far more to it than that. Yes. But those really are the pivotal moments, if you like.
Wow. Fantastic. I'm just going to talk to you today, if it's okay, about a few different areas. So I started thinking about Deb Morgan, relationships. What could I talk to her about? And I kind of sat here and thinking, and I thought there's 3 areas that popped into my head about different kind of impacts that I can see money has on relationships as an outsider that knows very little about relationship coaching. And I just wondered if you could talk to me a little bit more about these 3 things that I think are probably quite prevalent in lots of different relationships. So the first one is thinking about a couple where one earns more than the other, and sometimes it can be considerably more, and particularly where the woman is the one that's earning more. So I'm interested how you've seen that impact relationships and kind of the effects that can have.
Okay, that's an interesting one, because of course, whilst we all like to feel that we are very we're feminists and we're all out there and we're okay with things as they are, you know, the generational conditioning of the past is gone and we can accept that we are all equals, or in some cases women earn more. What I notice in relationships is that very often that still causes an issue. And the issue is because of the generational societal conditioning of the previous generations. So we have been brought up based on the values and beliefs of our parents, who were brought up on the values and beliefs of their parents, and so on and so on. And each generation then creates their own set of values and beliefs as well. So we end up as adults, generally we create a hybrid of values and beliefs that work with us, remaining sensitive to those of our parents, but actually creating our own identity. And it's very, very difficult for most people to really pull away from their parents' conditioning and their parents' values and beliefs. And what will often happen if a woman is earning more than a man is that whilst the couple might say they're okay with it, it's the underlying subconscious beliefs that are creating the conflict. And very often you'll find the male will say, well, you know, I don't mind that she earns more than me. That's absolutely fine. But subconsciously, he's got usually it would be his father's voice in the back of his head saying, what's wrong with you? Why can't you earn the same as her? So he's getting the messaging that he's a failure as a man. Lots of men tell me they feel emasculated because we still have that very, very deep-rooted DNA, if you like, genetic makeup that says men are the providers and women look after the family. And we move away from it as much as we can as we develop, but very often we are still stuck in that mindset. And so the man will say, I feel emasculated. The woman will say, well, I don't see what the problem is. I'm quite happy to buy him a car, or I'm quite happy to pay most of the bills and to run the house. But because of the generational societal conditioning that we've been brought up with, the man struggles with it. And that creates tension in a relationship. And very often they won't even understand where it's coming from. but it's all the stuff in our past, all the stuff in our history, all of the programming that is so deep rooted within our primitive brain that we don't even know it's there, because for the most part we go through life accepting, you know, all the advances in technology and in life and everything else. And it's that subliminal stuff, that unconscious stuff, that comes to the fore. And very often that's just a symptom of something that's underlying. So whilst I have couples who have that problem where the woman earns more, considerably more, you can work through it. It takes a lot of hard work. You can work through it, but it's understanding what's going on subconsciously. And that's the tough bit, because of course we don't think about it, because who sits down and has a cup of coffee and, I wonder what's going on in my subconscious at the moment about the situation I'm in. That stuff always comes out in different ways, and it's about looking at the symptoms and understanding it. Of course, when I have couples in that instance, then we work through a strategy that works for both of them. We find out what the male needs to feel sort of more equal, if you like, and likewise what the female can do. And I'm using a heterosexual couple there. It could be a same-sex couple, but you know what the female can do to make her partner feel more equal. And it's the same sort of work I do where I perhaps have a male and female couple where traditionally the male is earning more than the female, although you know that's a lot more common to deal with, but it's the same sort of strategy.
I see. So would you say in some circumstances that actually talking about it can actually help the problem? Would you say
Oh, absolutely.
people keep quiet and don't talk?
Absolutely. Very often what we feel, particularly if you're the partner who earns the lower amount, this could be male or female, is that you feel that by saying something you sound ungrateful. And as a partner who earns the lower amount, of course you're grateful that your partner is earning so much more and is able to perhaps look after the house or buy you a car or whatever it is. But what I've seen time and time again is that the other partner, the lower earning partner, always somehow feels that they're not quite good enough because they're not an equal. So by talking through all of that, helping them work out ways in which they feel they are an equal. And a lot of it might come down to just the amount of housework perhaps they do. And that's, be it male or female. It could be if you've got a partner who's earning significantly more, and usually if they're earning significantly more, they're working longer hours, etc., then perhaps you contribute just as much by doing the lion's share of housework, for example, or lion's share of childcare. So we start to talk through all of those sorts of things. We can put a value on it as well. I don't like to put a value on housework particularly, but okay, if you were going out and doing this, if you were going out and ironing, how much would you charge for that per hour? If you were going out and cleaning a house, how much would that cost per hour? So they start to see the value in the work they are doing, and gradually you see that that huge gap becomes a lot less.
That's really interesting, because I'd never even considered how you kind of value that and justify it to kind of yourself, like as a lower earner, how would you do that? So that's really interesting to see that you could actually physically put a value on it to help you kind of understand that.
Yeah, and it's about creating that value. Again, it's about subconsciously creating that link. Well, you know, if I'm doing all this ironing, if I'm doing all the cleaning, if I'm doing the cooking, if they were paying me to do this, I would be being paid X amount. Mm-hmm. And normally I sort of go about £15 an hour. I think, well, if I was to get a cleaner in, if I was to get an ironing person in, if I was to hire somebody to cook meals, how much would it cost? Now, okay, if you go out and do that in a salaried position, you're not going to be earning £15 an hour. But to pay somebody to come into your home and do it, I think £15 an hour actually is quite low.
Yeah.
But that's a nice sort of ballpark figure. And some couples will say, oh no, you know, it'd be more than that. It'd be £20 an hour. So I work with the couple, but I always use sort of £15 as the benchmark. And we go from there. And it's surprising how over the course of a week and then a month, that adds up.
That's really good. Thank you, Deb.
Welcome.
So another scenario that I was thinking about that jumped out to me was the impact that financial difficulties can have on a relationship, and not necessarily something that you both know about. Maybe one partner keeps something quiet and doesn't say something to the other because obviously they're fearful of what they might have to say about it. So if you could explore that one a little bit more for us and tell us your experience of that, that would be fantastic.
That one's really interesting, and I see that one a lot. And what happens there, excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat.
Okay.
Sorry. What happens usually in that instance is I will get approached by one half of the couple, and they'll say, we're arguing, we're having problems, and I don't understand why. And what's happened, like I said earlier, it's something always presents as a symptom. And usually what the person tells me they want to deal with is never the issue in the relationship. It's just a symptom of an underlying cause. So I will start talking to them about areas of their relationship. And it's usually not long before we find out that there's some issues around money. And when I ask deeper questions, then they'll say, well, actually, I've got a lot of debt. I haven't told my partner about it. And it's getting really stressful because they keep asking me for money to go towards things, or to go towards the bills or the house. And I certainly recommend that most couples try and have some sort of equal contribution to the household pot in some form or another. So they'll say to me, we're having these arguments because I can't contribute anymore. They don't understand why I can't contribute anymore when my salary is this, or I'm bringing this much in. And we don't know what's causing the problem. And I'll just say, have you told them about your debt? No. Why not? Because they'll go mad. And what I end up having to do then is actually coach them into how to have a difficult conversation. And sometimes I will invite them to bring their partner to a session, and we do it either face-to-face or via Zoom. And I'll invite them to bring their partner to the session so they can have that conversation. Or I'll give them a framework they can work with to enable them to have that conversation, and then put plans in place to deal with the debt. Now, having done that myself in the past, I can give them a very basic framework. But what I always do is say, look, I can give you this framework, work with this to start with. And it goes, it's as basic as list down all of your debt, list down all of your income, list down all of your outgoings, so you know exactly where you are. And it's something I do whenever I work with a couple. We work across all areas of their life. And certainly in my main program, I say, right, where are you right now in your relationship? I call it the get real stage. And we do relationships, we do health and wellness, we do business and career, and of course we do finance. So we go through the same process for each area in my program. And once they've done that, it's almost a huge sigh of relief, because very often people who are lying about their debt are also lying to themselves.
Yeah.
And when they can see exactly what they're dealing with, then you can create a plan. And when we've got to that point, then I will signpost them to various of sort of the debt help agencies out there. Or I'll say, go and speak to financial advisors such as yourselves. I know you don't really focus on debt, but I know with the Money Compass that you're involved with, that's a really, really good way of dealing with money issues on a sort of, not quite a forceful level, if you like.
Yeah.
So I'll always signpost them elsewhere. Once we've got that get real stage and they know what they're dealing with, it's right, now you know what you're dealing with, this is where you can go to sort that out. But I always advocate, have the conversation with your partner, then have the conversation with your creditors.
Very good advice there. So I was thinking about that in a bit more detail, and I was also thinking about, again, a woman would often do this to her husband or something and say, oh, this top, this dress, oh no, that's been in my wardrobe ages. No, that's not new. I haven't bought that. And secretly, obviously, of course, is brand new, but they're trying to hide that they've spent any money on it. Would you say things like that can stem much bigger problems further down the line in a relationship?
They can, and I work through part of that as well, actually, where we talk about a want versus a need. And if a couple or one individual within the couple has significant debt, I'll ask, why are you still spending money on a new dress, on a new lipstick, or whatever it might be? And again, that's usually a symptom that something else isn't working for them. So we do a lot of work to understand what's going wrong for them, what's not working, why are they spending money to fulfill something else, because that's usually what it is. And once we've established what that is, we can understand where it's coming from. We can work on what the actual problem is. So that spending money and then hiding it from a partner, that's going to cause conflict, because ultimately you're lying to your partner. Nobody wants to be lied to. And it's almost, you're going to say this is a huge leap, but if your partner came home and said to you, no, I wasn't out with another woman, but then you find out that they were out with another woman, you feel absolutely lied to. It's still a lie. Why should your partner, therefore, accept you lying over the amount of money you're spending on an item of clothing when you've got debt? It still has the same impact on the relationship. The partner still feels, well, I can't trust the other person. It comes down to trust. And whilst that was a very sort of different example, underneath all of that is the trust being eroded.
Yeah.
And that's what causes the problem in the relationship.
I see. So all of these things that we do are just kind of signposts to that key root problem that actually is the thing that needs dealing with.
Absolutely. And there might be couples who sort of go out and buy something, and you might perhaps spend a bit more on a dress than you wanted to, for example. Now, if you have the money there generally and you don't have significant debt, and your partner says, oh, that's a nice dress, where did you get that? Or what did you spend on that? So, oh, this old thing, I've had it there for a while. As a one-off, it's not so bad. But when that becomes habit, although if I rewind all that back, that's not saying that infidelity is, as a one-off, is okay. I'm not saying that at all. No. But if you have the means to buy something and you can have a laugh and a joke and say, oh, this old thing, because if it's a one-off, if it's a laugh and a joke, you're more likely to turn around to your partner and say, yeah, this old thing, I had this in the wardrobe for ages. No, actually, I did go out and I spent £50 more than I planned to, but it's okay because I've got the money there.
Yeah.
So you can have that sort of conversation. And it's like so much with language and in couples, it's all about the nuances. And that's what I work on with them.
Fantastic. So the last kind of scenario that I was thinking about is a couple where one of them is a very keen saver that wants to put money away for a rainy day and wants to have a better future and is hard working and saving for that, yet the other partner will spend every single penny. As soon as it touches their bank account or it's in their pocket, they have to spend it. How on earth would you go about bridging that gap in a relationship to help that couple see eye to eye?
That's a really interesting one. What I would try and do in that instance, and it doesn't always work, sometimes that's just their patterns, and if it works for them on the whole, then that's great. But usually I will work with the couple and find out, okay, what are their joint goals? Say they want to go on holiday, perhaps they want to buy a specific house or a better car or a motorhome or something like that. I've had people come to me with all of those. What are your joint goals? How can you work together to make this happen? Because it's not fair to be solely dependent on the person who's the saver. Because if you have joint goals and one person is saving and the other person isn't, that's not a joint goal. That's a joint goal in as much as the person who's not saving is saying, well, yeah, I'm happy to go with that as long as they buy it. So we work out what the joint goals are, what each couple actually really wants. It might be one wants a big house and the other actually wants a caravan. You don't know.
Yeah.
So we look at where the compromise can be, and we look at what each couple, each partner is happy to contribute to that. And if the one who's not saving just is adamant, no, I'm not going to put anything towards it, then they actually don't get a say in what the person who is saving spends their money on. And if the person who's not saving wants a big house, wants a nice car, wants a decent holiday, then it's having that tough conversation. And my job as a coach is to have a tough conversation and say, So why do you deserve that if you're not prepared to contribute to it? Not to say that the other partner can't gift things to the partner who doesn't save, but it's not about bailing them out all the time, because at some stage, if you want the nice things, you have to take responsibility for getting them yourself. And that kind of goes full circle back to the first scenario you gave me, where one partner earns significantly more than the other. Again, it's not about each going in 50-50. It's about saying, okay, I can contribute 75%. I can afford to contribute 25%. It's about looking at who earns what, where the income and outgoings are, what they can afford to save, and actually taking it from there. So you look at what the goal is, you look at what they need to save, work out who can save what. If between them they are able to save the amount they need to save to achieve that goal, fantastic. If not, or the one partner isn't prepared to, then it's about having the conversation about maybe you need to reconsider what your objective is, what your dream is. Do we change that? So there's so many variables, so many conversations you can have around it. But hopefully, in a nutshell, I've given you an idea of the sorts of conversations I would be having.
I see. So you've mentioned there several times in a couple of scenarios, like equal contributions. And by the sounds of it, it doesn't necessarily need to be a monetary value necessarily. It's contributing what you can financially, but also making sure you're committing and contributing to the same kind of goals and dreams.
Exactly. And of course, let's not undervalue emotional support. If your partner is totally supportive for you, say you're going through a tough time, and you've got a partner who's there for you, who you can talk to, who'll put their arms around you and say, it's okay, it's going to be okay. They don't necessarily have the answers. You know, the value of emotional support is priceless. So I look at all aspects of the relationship, and we put not such a monetary value, but I work with couples to help them understand that having an equal relationship isn't always about having the same amounts of money.
That's really important to remember. Thank you, Deb. So I've been really interested in everything you've had to say today, and I'm sure our listeners have too, and they might want to get in touch and ask you some more questions, or they might have a relationship they need some help with themselves. So could you tell us how our listeners could get in touch with you and how you may be able to help them?
Yes, certainly. Contact me through my website, which is www.notarehearsal.co.uk, or you can find me on Facebook. I've got a group, a women's group called Real Women, Real Life, Real Relationships. Love to see you in there. Or look at the Not a Rehearsal page on Facebook as well. You can contact me through any of those means. I'm on other social media as well, but I won't bombard you with all of that right now.
Fabulous, thank you. So is there one top tip or key piece of information that you could leave with our listeners that may be able to help them with their relationship and money?
Yes, talk, have the conversation. I know it's hard, I know it's difficult, but have that conversation, because the more you talk, the more you can sort out. And if you don't want to have that conversation on your own, let me know and I can help.
Fantastic. So being your recipe for financial success as well, it wouldn't be right if I didn't ask you, just at the end here, Deb, what is your favourite recipe?
Oh my goodness, now I'm not a big cake eater, so I had to think about this one. I've got lots of allergies, so I haven't really eaten cake or biscuits or anything for many, many years. But there is one cake I have made in recent years, which some of my friends know if I'm making it, they beat a path to my front door. And it's a gluten and dairy-free coffee cake.
Oh,
And absolutely stunning. I can read the recipe if you would like me to.
go for it.
Okay, so you have 200 grams of butter, 200 grams of caster sugar, 4 eggs, 200 grams of gluten-free self-raising flour, although I use rice flour. Then you want 3 tablespoons of strong black coffee and 200 grams of cream cheese. Now these days I use a vegan alternative because that doesn't contain dairy or soya. And then you want some icing sugar for the top. All you're going to do is cream together the butter and sugar until it's light and fluffy, then beat in the eggs one at a time, then beat in the flour, then mix 2 spoons of the coffee, mix in 2 spoons of the coffee, and you've made that up into a strong coffee in a cup. Then what you want to do is divide the mixture between 2 oiled and lined 20 centimetre round baking tins. Bake in a preheated oven for 20 to 25 minutes. Cool on a wire rack. Then the cream cheese, mix the cream cheese with some of the icing sugar. Spread that in the middle like a Victoria sandwich. Put the other layer on top, and then sprinkle the top either with icing sugar or caster sugar, or you can use some more of the coffee to create a coffee icing if you like. And sometimes people will put walnuts on the top as well, but I like it just as the coffee cake with a little bit of icing sugar on top, and it's absolutely stunning.
That sounds absolutely delicious. And if it wasn't so early in the morning, I'd be very tempted for a slice right now.
I have been known to have a slice for breakfast in the past, I have to be honest.
Very nice. I'll make sure we get that recipe up on our website as well, so we can share that with everybody too. So thank you so much, Deb. It's been lovely to have you today, and I'm sure we will be speaking to you again in future.
Thank you, Emma. I've really enjoyed being here.
And with that, we've completed today's recipe. We hope you have enjoyed following along with us today and cooking yourself one recipe closer to a financially secure future.
If you've enjoyed today's podcast, you can head over to www.recipeforfinancialsuccess.co.uk, where you can find out more information and a full list of ingredients from today's recipe. For more hints, tips and tasters, find us on Facebook at Your Recipe for Financial Success.
If you'd like to get more involved, share your own experiences and learn from a friendly community on a similar journey to you, why not join us in our new Facebook group, The Money Compass, where we will support you to navigate your way to financial success.
Thank you for listening and see you next time.